Alright guys, welcome to Wacko Radio. Tonight on Wacko Radio, we already dabbled on a horror movie, but we kind of made fun of it. But this time, we're going to do one of our favorite, maybe new favorite Christmas horror movie, since 'tis the season, so we figure we'll do some Christmas holiday type scary movie. And the main one that comes to mind is this 1974 classic, which we will introduce what the name is after this music, and we will introduce the guest tonight on Wacko Radio when we come back after the music. Here we go. All right. Welcome back, guys. The guest tonight, for one thing, Brad Wacko here. I'm solo this episode. The first time I'm doing it without Liz Wacko. So if she's listening out there, hi. But the guest we have today, returning to Wacko Radio, is James the Rhinestone Reinhardt.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be back on Wacko Radio.
He's back and ready to whack.
Feels like I never left.
It really does. And last time James was here we did Bram Stoker's Dracula, and we were kind of ripping on it a little bit. So this time, I'm honored to have James here because this is the first, like I said, episode about a horror movie that we really have done and actually talked about something that we respected and enjoyed. And that movie is the 1974 cult classic Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark. And we could just dive in and start talking about this movie. I mean, James actually saw it for the first time about a week or so ago. What were your thoughts, James?
I think I posted on Facebook, where's this movie been all my life? I loved it, man. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, and it's a film that I've been hearing about a lot, especially this past year. It kept coming up. I kept hearing how great it is, and I kept saying to myself, I got to see this eventually, but you were the one to watch it, man, and be on the show, and here I am,
and here he is, and so it was kind of almost exciting. I mean, I rewatched it a couple weeks prior to when you did, and I mean, I've seen it probably now, including this last time, I'm sure 4 times. It's not that many times, so it's still kind of, even rewatching it, there's still bits and pieces I didn't really remember, and some subjects they tackle, which it gets pretty intense in certain things, and but watching it, it's another one. It's in the fact that it's pre-Halloween. That's what people got to remember. I mean, this is 1974. Halloween was 78, and even though John Carpenter's Halloween was the dawn, kind of almost like the dawn of slasher films, this movie, the fact that it beat it by 4 years. I mean, this is one that is almost underrated in a way, or like the fact, James, you never saw it.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of, it's one of those movies that is like a role setter, and it's one that I think everyone should see. But let me ask, these 70s movies, I could understand, I mean, I'm a fan of horror and I'm a fan of film, but sometimes when I watch movies, I try to think with an open mind and think of I'm trying to think how to word it. I can understand that this movie maybe is what do you think about the pacing, James? I'm trying to ask.
There's a little bit in the middle where I was kind of come on, movie.
Starts dragging.
Yeah, but then, it picks up really fast, I thought. But there's some where, I always say, a good horror film is kind of and a good film in general, but I think it's especially important in horror. It's almost like a game of chess where you have to get all your pieces in the right place.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's checkmate. And it seemed like a lot of the middle was kind of getting the pieces in place to start, knocking them off.
Yeah, because it did open up with one of the crank phone calls. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, so do you think, because my whole, what I was trying to say with that question is the fact that it is kind of a slower paced movie, even though in the 70s, most films were, have kind of that slow pacing. So I could understand a newer or younger audience member thinking this movie is kind of slower, and that was what I was trying to the point I was attempting to make, in that you being a horror fan and a fan of these 70s films, you could almost get behind the pacing and kind of the slow build up. But I see what you mean, though. Like, it did seem like there was a section in the middle. Like, I wonder, do you think if it was just all one night, would that have been the way to do it, do you think? Opposed to, like, it's the girl gets killed the first night. The next day, they're looking for it.
Her dad shows up.
Her dad shows up. Like, I wonder if it was all one night, if that would have paced it out. Or would that have been... What do you think if that was, not to say, like, what if, but...
I think that probably would have helped the pacing if this all took place over one night.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you know, they chose, like, I think it takes place over 2 days or something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's the first night, and that's when the guy who the father's looking for, the daughter, I can't think of her name, she gets killed the first night, and then, yeah, I guess the second night after they find the missing girl in the woods. I think it's a girl. Missing girl in the woods? Yeah, it's a missing girl,
yeah. They find her dead.
Find her in the woods. And then the finale is that night. But, I know exactly. I see what you're saying with... It does seem like there's a chunk in the middle, even though I'm thinking about it now, and I just watched not too long ago. I feel like there's even parts that I forget already, like in that middle chunk. And you kind of you start catching yourself looking at your phone. You're like, oh shit, that's not good.
Yeah, that and there's a lot of the like the drama between Olivia Hussey's character and her boyfriend, which is all kind of setting up this red herring that the boyfriend is the killer. Because she tells him that, you know, she's pregnant, but she's gonna get an abortion.
Yeah,
and he doesn't take that well, and then it doesn't show it, but it strongly hints that because he's so upset that he fucks up his piano recital.
Yeah,
because of that.
Which and I like that kind of subplot or B storyline with those two. And actually the actor Keir, who plays Olivia Hussey's Jess and how do you say his name? Keir Dullea plays Peter.
Yeah, I guess Keir Dullea. I don't know.
Keir Dullea, who I would think most fans would know from 2001: A Space Odyssey.
That's where I've seen him.
The
movie. I'm like, where the fuck have I seen this guy?
Yeah. How old? Because he's kind of... Because I was looking up his resume, and he was like mid-30s, I think, during Black Christmas. Wow. So I wonder, like, was he supposed to be like... Are they all supposed to be college age?
That's what I guess. They're all supposed to be college age.
Yeah.
But like Olivia Hussey, like, or Hussey, how you say her name? The whole movie, I'm like, where have I seen her before? And it turns out she's Juliet in Romeo and Juliet, but also she's in the original the original miniseries.
Oh, well, she's the wife.
Yeah.
What's his name's wife?
Like in a coma. Bill Denborough's wife.
Oh, shit. You're right, man.
And she, like, doesn't look any different. And it's like 20-some years after this.
Yeah, dude. See, good call, man. See, there you go. I learned that, too. I did not know that. And then, of course, we got Margot Kidder, who I've always liked. Yeah, I've always had a crush on her.
Lois Lane herself.
We got John Saxon, who's back as another cop.
Yeah, this is what
I mean, he does make the perfect cop. I mean,
yeah, he looks like a cop.
He's still kicking it. He's got to be.
Yeah,
Cheers to Saxon. He's got to be 90s. I mean, he was old in that movie.
Yeah, because I thought like Saxon had passed away. Then at some point this year, it was brought to my attention that he's still alive.
He's still kicking.
I could have swore I read that he passed away a few years ago, but yeah, he's still kicking. But yeah, I would love it if, like, my headcanon is, I know it's not true, but that Saxon's cop character is the same in all these movies.
That'd be an interesting, like, recut trailer or something if you get all the movies. Because he was, Nightmare on Elm Street, which was 10 years after this movie.
Wow.
So, and he, what else was he a cop in? Shit, dude, there's another one.
Didn't he cameo as a cop in From Dusk Till Dawn?
No, but the first one?
I think so.
No.
There's some movie where, like, there's a cop on TV and it's John Saxon.
Oh, dude, no, you're right, man. Yeah. No, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that was him.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I think he's just on TV. Like, we're gonna catch these guys.
Like the Gecko Brothers. Yeah. They're escaped. You're right, dude. Mm-hmm. So there you go. I mean, he's, and God bless him, man. I mean, and
that's my coffee maker.
Startled me. I thought it was a obscene phone call. Actually, speaking of. And, of course, John Saxon, Dario Argento's 1982 Tenebrae.
Yeah, Tenebrae, yeah.
Tenebrae, which I'm sure will be podcasted about one of these days. But
he's gotten around the horror genre in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, he really did, man. And he's great. I mean, and they have... That was one thing... This movie also, as kind of fucked up as it is, and we'll go through it more... But it does have a lot of comedy in it as well, especially like in the police station, that the whole sequence with them like picking on the whoever answers the calls and shit. I don't know what that name is for that.
Oh yeah,
what that job title is.
Yeah,
but the scene when like Margot Kidder wrote fellatio and he kept saying it, and they're all like cracking up.
Oh yeah, or like the fraternity mom that has like the alcohol like stashed all over.
Exactly. I mean that is pretty hilarious. So as dark as this movie is, you could definitely see the elements of comedy, and then Bob Clark, who I think 10 years after this directed A Christmas Story, which I would imagine he is more known or famous for that movie, because that movie really became this legendary.
And I kind of feel like this is one that should, because I am not really a fan of A Christmas Story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. You know, I get it. They play it every year for 24 hours and shit. And it's
I think that's my problem. Is like there's a certain bunch of movies, and I lump like Fight Club in this too, where like they came out and they weren't successful, and then they started catching on, and you're like, oh, cool, these movies that deserve this are catching on, and they go from being like underrated to like overrated and overplayed. Like,
yeah,
because like Fight Club, I used to love Fight Club, but then all of a sudden like Fight Club became everyone's favorite movie.
Yeah, you're right though. That with that's one that I have to re-educate myself and rewatch. But I mean, you're right. It was one of those things, and I don't want to sound. I don't know what the word is. Like, I don't know what the word is, but. Do you feel like sometimes, like, if something's, like you said, so overly liked that it kind of takes away from...
I kind of think so,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know it sounds like... What's the word for that? Cynical? No, not cynical. What is
I don't know, maybe, like, hipstery, almost?
Hipster.
Yeah. But, like, because, like, you know, Fight Club, I was the same, where, like, I saw it, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. You know, why do more people like this movie? Then all of a sudden, everyone, like, thinks they're deep for, like, liking Fight Club. And, you know... I've so many idiots out there that are like, oh yeah, like I love Tyler Durden, and I'm like, you're not supposed to. You kind of missed the point of the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm the same for Christmas Story, where like Christmas Story kind of gained this cult following, and now you know it's on, like you said, 24 hours a day.
It's like it's like on Christmas, it's like played on TBS or something for 24 hours, which they should be. They should have Black Christmas in that rotation. I guess it's kind of like a bummer, I guess, if you're watching that for like Christmas morning. But I would.
Yeah, I totally would.
I would rather wake up in the morning and put that on than A Christmas Story. Now, Christmas Vacation, maybe. That should... See, Christmas Vacation, that should be on 24 hours.
Yeah, I love Christmas Vacation.
That one's the way to go. But back to Black Christmas, which IMDb gave it a 7.2 out of 10. Which,
not bad.
And those fuckers over at Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 67%, which, what do you think about that? Does that seem kind of low?
Yeah, it seems low. I think.
Maybe a little bit low. What about 7.2 out of 10?
I'd say 7 or 8 out of 10 for
7
me.
or 8 out of 10. I would think so. I mean, especially for the fact that we were saying it, the film's like not a trendsetter, but it kind of like wrote the rules of like your modern day slashers. Like, 'cause Psycho was 60, I think late 60s. Late 60s?
I'm going to say, yeah. But,
and The Night of the Living Dead, which was kind of Dawn of the Zombie movies, obviously. But then 1974 isn't much after that, man. I mean, it's still basically mid or early 70s, and this is before everything. But it's interesting because we were talking about Tenebrae is we're Argento fans here, and you could see it has like giallo kind of feel, like you were mentioning, James, and
I was wrong. Psycho's 1960.
I thought it was later. I thought it was because the fact that it's so black and white too.
Yeah,
it was like the 60s. That seems like is when color really started.
I guess I always just think it's late because it like ushers in the 70s as far as horror goes. Like Psycho's kind of like opened the door, but I guess it took like 10 years for like someone to get there. And
yeah, because you figure like 1972 was Last House on the Left with Wes Craven first film, and that was kind of started this whole kind of, I guess, like more of a gritty, because I don't know when Deliverance came out, but I think it came out after
Last House on the Left. Chainsaw Massacre, that was the 70s too.
74 again, which is the same with Black Christmas. So yeah, early 70s definitely. You had, looking at the history of specifically horror movies, like after Psycho, which was like supposed to be like, what do they call, like the modern horror, or is that, or like the dawn of the modern horror?
I watched. There was a great BBC doc. I think I might have mentioned it last podcast, but it's on YouTube called A History of Horror. It's a three-part
you
BBC.
did mention that, yeah.
It's a three-part BBC documentary, and Mark Gatiss, the gentleman who hosts it, he refers to Psycho as the beginning of like the American New Wave of horror.
American New Wave of horror. That is a good way to put it.
Yeah, and that's kind of like how and that's a good way to put it. And that's kind of how I've been thinking of it too, where like Psycho begins and we get all these other movies that
Yeah, because before that, which apologize audience if we were just talking about this in the Bram Stoker's Dracula podcast, but before that it was just basically monster movies.
Yeah,
horror was just all monster and castles and ghosts and Psycho came along. I mean, I'm sure if Psycho didn't come along, something else of that nature would have happened.
Yeah.
Which in my opinion, I've always been more into the I don't want to call it raw horror, but kind of like something like Black Christmas or Texas Chainsaw. Something with just like real people fucking up real people. I think is always much more scarier than a monster or a ghost running around a house.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I think, because with Psycho, Psycho, both that and Texas Chainsaw Massacre were inspired by Ed Gein, obviously. Like the killer next door kind of thing.
Killer next door, exactly.
So I think, like, once his murders kind of reached the American consciousness, like, the fact that, like, this monster could seemingly be living next door to you kind of got in everyone's head, and we got movies like Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even this Black Christmas, which kind of takes the extreme of that monster next door.
Yeah, and puts it in the attic, which is a whole nother awesome kind of horrific bit they have throughout this movie. When did, not to get off, and we'll get back to Black Christmas, but when did that Peeping Tom come out? Which I never saw.
I never saw it either.
That's supposed to be like the first. They claim that that's like the first like kind of slasher film, and that was black and white. So I would imagine that was in the '60s. So that dated this movie too. But as far as like killer POV, Argento did it with a lot of his early Giallo films. But the fact that this is before Halloween, it's actually funny to think that, because one of the opening scenes is a dude walking up to a house, going into a house, all POV. You see their hands. Yeah. But this guy climbs up the whatever that thing's called on the side of the house and breaks in the attic and so so taking the concept of the guy next door or your neighbor is the one behind it all, and put it in the attic, and he's there the whole time, kind of adds to the whole creepiness of the movie. And then the movie starts off, you introduce the girls a little bit, and then they get the first call from the killer, who I guess disguises his voice as multiple. Yeah, it seems that he can do multiple voices, and he refers to himself as Billy. Yeah, which is Billy. Yeah, but and that's what surprised me about this movie when I was, because for my podcast we were doing our Halloween episode, and I was researching Halloween, and I found out this predated Halloween, because I didn't know that. That's why I'd never really been like drawn to this movie, because I assumed it was one of those films that came out after Halloween. After Halloween, they kind of ripped it off. Yeah. But then I found this predated it, and that Halloween at one point supposedly was conceived as a sequel to this, and then became its own thing. Yeah, I remember us talking about this a little bit on your podcast over at Cinema d'Amore. We did this Halloween episode that they were nice enough to have me on. But we discussed briefly, I remember reading a story and hearing this rumor about Carpenter meeting with Bob Clark. Yeah. Because Carpenter was just becoming established. I mean, he did a couple films. He did his Assault on Precinct 13. Halloween didn't come out yet, so he was still kind of this like new young writer who kind of was breaking into the business. And I read somewhere, and I heard that Carpenter asked Bob Clark if he talked about doing a sequel, or maybe Carpenter was interested in doing a sequel to it. And Bob Clark had this idea about this guy escaping from an insane asylum and then coming back on Halloween night. So you got Black Christmas, which is in Christmas, and then you make a sequel. I'm not saying it would be called Black Halloween, but I don't know, it could be called something like Halloween, that. And maybe have some sort of like holiday sequel feel to it. And I thought that was interesting, because then it makes you think of Carpenter, and it's like, oh man, did he just completely just ripped he got this babysitter idea and just took that idea and said, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. Maybe they had a meeting together, and who knows? Yeah, Carpenter might have walked away and been like, this guy's an asshole. Like, I'm taking this. Yeah, because I read the same. I read an article too that mentioned that like supposedly they met up and discussed this idea, and I don't know if it just never went anywhere, or if Carpenter decided to make his own thing. But yeah, and it's surprising when I was watching this,
thinking that because like there's so much of Halloween in there where obviously the POV or the fact
bunch of girls,
yeah, where that it's heavily inspired by urban legends, where like there's so many urban legends about the escaped lunatic.
Yeah.
And this one, obviously, it's the killer inside the house urban legend. But what also surprised me is at the beginning, like the one girl they like established as like the good like virgin. They like call her out to that, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is gonna be the hero knowing slasher tropes.
Yeah.
And she ends up being the first victim.
She gets the first. You're right.
And that surprised me. I'm like, holy fuck!
That scene always scares me when he pops out of the closet behind the clear bagged clothes bags. I don't know what they're called. Clothes
They're
bags.
like clothing bag. Yeah, that also surprised me because like they set up that like there's something in her closet, and I'm assuming it's gonna be a fake out. I'm like, oh, this could be her boyfriend or like a cat.
Which they had a cat scare, I think, at some point.
Yeah,
maybe right before that, actually.
But I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a fake out. This girl's gonna be the hero, and no, she's fucking like the good girl who we've been trained to assume is gonna be the one that lives. She's the first one to die
within like 10 minutes.
I mean, it's
pretty early on, and that would actually even makes it. Looking back, it makes it almost even more. That's the one that the father's like looking for the whole time. It's like, fuck, dude, like she's dead this whole fucking time.
Yeah,
It almost gives it like an element of just a little bit of more upsetting, I would think. Yeah, and actually that the first victim, I'm not sure what the character's name is, man. There's so many girls, it's hard to kind of
I don't know
keep up with. Maybe her name is Claire. I don't know, but actually, anyway, it doesn't matter. But and it's like it's like on the poster, but it is quite disturbing. Like the whole rocking, like just in the rocking chair up in the window. It's just a whole nother very like I don't know if it's like an homage to Psycho, but it is very Psycho, like dead body in the chair. Like,
and she's like wrapped into plastic.
Yeah,
and then like he seems to be enacting like some sort of like domestic scene with her because he like rocks the chair back and forth, and then he puts like a baby doll in her arms and
that's just another example of just the psychology behind it and behind the killer, and just like showing that moment and maybe that's one of the most disturbing moments because you have the POV, so the audience has the feel like, okay, we're the killer. And like you just think like what's going on in his mind, in this person's mind right now? He's sitting here looking at this, freaking out, like almost crying, getting hysterical, rocking her back and forth. He starts throwing shit, just losing his shit. And that's almost to me personally, that's more like eerie and disturbing than, seeing whatever. It's one of the actual death scenes, let's say. Like I think that's more creepier because you're really like you're right there with the killer. And it's just weird because you think like, what is going on in this person's head, man? Mm-hmm. Like it gives me the Jeepers creepers.
That and the killer is always kind of shrouded. You never see his face. You only hear him. Yeah, you'll see his eyes.
His eye.
Yeah, and he.
I was wondering who that actor is because it looks like the boyfriend.
Yeah, and that's the whole movie is like convincing you that it's the boyfriend right up until like the final.
Did the boyfriend kill any? Do you think the boyfriend killed anybody?
I don't think so. No,
he just was kind of going after her.
I think it was a fake out because the movie really wants you to think it's the boyfriend and that he's upset with the fact that she said she's gonna abort their baby. And, but I just think that this is just some deranged dude that's still hanging out in their attic.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll talk about like the twist ending momentarily, but talking about the whole subplot with the abortion. I mean, even right there, just puts that movie, gives it that element of realism that this is an everyday situation that young couples have, and it just gives it just more of that raw. Kind of like even last night, not to get way off track, but I just rewatched Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Did you ever see that movie?
I did a long time ago.
It's a great one. I mean, it's a little bit. Those 80s sex comedies get kind of hokey. It just almost seems like sequences opposed to like an actual,
Yeah, I think that's why I wasn't that big of a fan of it because it just seemed like a bunch of like scenes strung together.
There's like a lot of casts they jump back and forth with, but. Something I really respected with that movie and just with older movies, that was like mid-80s, was they had this whole abortion type of scenario where the girl did it and the guy didn't. And it's just like giving that movie an element of realism and making it just seem more, the characters more real. And then look at Black Christmas, which is probably about 10 years before that movie, and then them tackling the subject, and it does, and then seeing that guy lose his shit, and it is kind of a good, even though you would think, though, I mean, wouldn't the audience think that it's not him, though? Do you think people were duped at the end? Because wouldn't they think, well, people were already getting killed before he knew this news.
Yeah, I don't think
what I mean?
anyone really bought it. And because even with me, I'm like, oh, that feels really kind of incomplete that he's the killer. And then we get this ending that, because, you know, I guess we'll get into it now. But
Sure.
But, you know, like the girl finds that the killer's in the house and she's hiding, and someone comes after her, and she's at this point she thinks it's the boyfriend. So she beats him to death.
And it is the boyfriend.
Yeah, it's the boyfriend.
She's in the basement.
Yeah, she's in the basement, but she thinks the boyfriend is the killer as well.
Yeah.
So she beats him to death. Like, you know, thinking that she's defending herself. And the cops buy it too. They're like, oh yeah, you know, she's self-defense. But then we get that shot of like the attic.
Phone ringing.
Yeah, the phone ringing, and you hear like the killer talking. It's just like, Agnes, it's Billy or something.
It's Billy, Agnes. And then and then the fucking chick is still in that rocking chair up there, still hanging, rocking away, looking out the window.
So it's a really, like, that ending really unsettled me. It's such a creepy open ending where like you realize this girl's like, she's like alone in his house, like she's lying in bed, and this guy is still in the house with her. Who the hell knows what, you know, it's not looking good.
No, and what reminded me, they had, because her boyfriend Peter and Jess are arguing, and then he makes a comment about like, it's not like removing a wart, something about that. And then when she gets the crank phone call, he says that. So then I think that is supposed to make the audience think, oh shit, it is the boyfriend. But then it's like, no, he was just upstairs, he was just listening, or maybe, you know, he was, because he keeps coming down, the killer keeps coming down to even to the main floor, but he keeps going and like looking down, like listening, right there at the top of the stairs. No one even knows. I mean, it is a great concept. And another movie, we said how Halloween ripped it off, but another movie, which I saw a long time ago, When a Stranger Calls. Did you ever see that one?
I saw the remake.
I did see the remake. I saw that. Yeah, I don't really remember. I saw the remake in theaters, and I don't know. I was young. I'm sure we all dug it. I don't really remember.
Yeah, I was young too. It was one of those movies that like you just see because you're like a kid.
Yeah, it was like the new horror movies out. Let's all go on a Friday night or whatever. But the original, what's funny about the original, what I remember about the original Stranger Calls, which that came out in 1979. So that's, what is that math? 5 years after Black Christmas, and that's completely ripping it off because she gets a phone call. But this whole thing is there's kids involved, and he says, have you checked the children? And then she has to go up. But in the remake of that movie, the whole movie is that night with the girl. But in the original, that's like the opening 15 minutes, and then it cuts to this whole like detective story or something. And that's what I don't remember. Those are the scenes I really don't remember about that movie. But that movie completely ripped off, I mean, the fact that the killer's in the house, he's calling from in the house, like... That's a straight up.
And that's like, I don't know, this is suspense I love in this movie because you as the audience, you know the killer's in the house. Like, you know he's there. And like, you know, the girls tell the cops you're getting these obscene phone calls, so the cops keep trying to trace it. And the whole time you're like, come on, get, and you know you're getting that moment where the cops are like, oh, it's inside the house. Yeah.
And yeah, that is a badass little, sequence that towards the end of the movie. Even though the audience knows, it's nice to see the character now, like, realizing, and it's just like, oh, dude, that would be the absolute, that is terrifying.
Even that, and you're in the cop's shoes where the cop's like, get out of the house, and she's like, well, what about the other people? And he's like, just get out of the house. And of course, it's a horror film, so the character has to make a bad decision, so she's like, now I want to go upstairs to get the other people, and the cop's like getting mad. He's like, no, just like get out of there.
Another thing that I love the location. I think the house is like pretty perfect.
Yeah.
The fact that it's cold, and you know it's cold because they have those exterior scenes when you could see their breath so in your face, and it's and they shot in Canada. It's a Canadian production, okay. So it's probably really fucking cold, and that almost gives it, with the location of the house and just kind of like that snowy, cold town, it just gives it a whole nother. It just because it's kind of a cold movie.
Yeah.
To begin with, and that now the fact that it is cold, like if this was set in like California or like the beach or something, like probably wouldn't have.
Oh yeah, the
same kind of atmosphere
wouldn't be the same for sure. Yeah.
So I think this movie really nailed the location, and I also think that just the tone, and that's something that I feel that some horror movies now kind of miss. Like there's been some, we've had some great ones, and like I was just saying, I just saw that Happy Death Day recently. I thought that one was cool. But a lot of horror movies, like I feel like they jump around too much with the tones instead of setting like one nice steady kind of like feel and tone and vibe of a movie. A lot of movies kind of try to jump around too much, and sometimes I feel that affects the end movie.
No, I get you. Yeah.
But this movie, it just has that. It's just that that time period of those raw horror movies like Last House on the Left and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you watch it, and it's almost probably a movie that might be more enjoyable watching on like the VHS tape, because that just gives it a whole nother kind of gritty, raw, like just like upsetting movie. Like this movie has some comedic relief in it, but it is like a pretty upsetting movie. There's not really like, oh, the heroes made it and the killer's dead, they're out and the sun is rising or whatever the hell. It's just and that comes back to the ending, the fact that it just ends and it's like, shit, nothing really
was resolved.
Nothing resolved at all, man. I mean, they think it was, and that was a good twist, and I do like, and I heard that audience at that time hated, like, or just didn't, because there wasn't a resolution at the end.
Yeah.
And the audience members kind of said, I could see the credits starting and people saying, what? Like, that's how it ends, like that? But it just kind of goes along with the rest of the tone of the movie and just gives you that, you feel like the same way you felt at the very beginning, just like, oh man, this is dark, and it ended dark. It's like, I would consider this a dark ending.
Yeah.
Like there's no happy ending.
Yeah, and I love open endings a lot, and I like that it's pretty open, but we can kind of infer that unless Billy decides that he's feeling charitable, that he's most likely going to kill this girl.
Exactly.
And but I love that it didn't have to tell us that like we're kind of left unsettled because we don't know what's coming next.
Yeah, and there totally could have been a sequel. I mean, you might as well say Halloween was the sequel. I mean, you could probably cut those movies together if you really wanted to. That'd actually be an interesting experiment to try. Because, it is, and I'm with you, man. I like the open endings, and a lot of those movies do. A lot of those horror movies do end. I mean, that one's maybe more opened, but I mean, look at like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is the same year. I mean, that one, there's still a bunch of dudes alive. Like, this chick is completely fucked. I mean, she's in the back of the pickup truck just, like, hysterical.
Yeah, she's crazy, yeah.
And that, which is another dark ending, because it's like, okay, like, her friends and family all just got killed, and these people were still there, and she's probably going to go to some, mental hospital, because she's probably fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, even the girl in this one, like, she's probably fucked too, man.
Or even like Halloween.
Same deal.
The ending of Halloween.
Yeah, exactly.
Where,
which comes back to even more of a ripoff. Yeah. It makes you think, because that is completely open-ended too. Which obviously is great, and Halloween still probably is better, because maybe I think, not to compare the two, but now that we're talking about it, I think Halloween just, maybe the pacing was better. Maybe the characters were better in Halloween. Like, I don't really remember, like, Margot Kidder in this film.
Yeah, she kind of sticks out.
She sticks out, but that's about it. I mean, the main girl, Jess, how do you say her name? Olivia.
I think it's Olivia Hussey.
Olivia Hussey. I mean, she did great. But yeah, you would think that Margot Kidder is the character that kind of stands out. She's the wild child, drinking a lot, sorority chick who gets it. Because I should have took a number of how many deaths there were in this movie, and it actually isn't really like a bloody movie, but it seems like, I bet it is, just like Texas Chainsaw or Halloween. Like, none of them are really like bloody movies. I feel like that kind of generation of horror movies hasn't happened just yet. I mean, Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes and stuff, Wes Craven projects. I mean, those were maybe a little bit more on the gore side, but it seemed like it wasn't until like the early 80s, and that like special effects kind of became like what horror movies
Yeah,
were.
I think the 80s was kind of the rise of like the gore.
The gore.
I'd say maybe Dawn of the Dead
Probably
started that.
You're right.
The 80s, we got like Friday the 13th, which, Savini, obviously, and he kind of helped usher in that obsession with like gore. That and, or you can even go back to, the Italians and Giallo films. Those.
Very true.
So I think, there was definitely like a 1-2 punch of like Dawn of the Dead and then like Giallo was kind of around the same time.
But Giallo was more like, that was a lot of like Italian horror. So that was almost its own like kind of subgenre. Like Lucio Fulci and Dario Argento, because that was like late 60s, early 70s. So that was, you're right, man. I mean, that is a good call. I mean, those movies did have that slasher gore element, but maybe Halloween started kind of, not Halloween, but we should specifically say the 80s, or the American cinema in the 80s is when it became so like you said, like the dawn of special effects and gore. But that's the reason why I think this Black Christmas is good, because it is a lot of off-camera deaths, and you don't see much. Like the opening death is a simple suffocating scene.
Yeah, suffocation, and
it still might be one of the most disturbing deaths in the movie.
Yeah.
Because besides the chick getting suffocated by the bag, I think probably the death that stands out, would you say, is the unicorn scene?
Which that's
Margot Kidder?
Probably my favorite scene in the movie. Because you got, the dude like creeping into Margot Kidder's room. She's got like this crystal unicorn with a pointy end. And you know exactly that's.
I know.
As soon as you see it, you're like, oh, that's how she's going. But then you have Jess, the main character, I guess the main character, but she, she's listening to carolers outside. And it's like a really good moment because Jess is like enjoying listening. She's like smiling, listening to these carolers. And then you got Margot Kidder upstairs being stabbed to death with this fucking unicorn head by Billy, and Jess can't hear it over the carolers. And it's, to me, like that scene was, I was watching like, wow, holy shit, like it's so good because you got this one character having like a nice moment while her friend is upstairs being brutally murdered, and it's
a great like I don't know if there's a name for it, like a paralleling scene. I don't know what they would call it, but the fact that you have this, you have this woman listening to this nice song with these kids. Mm-hmm. Who have bright futures, or whatever, and then like you said, right upstairs is this chick just completely getting fucked up, man. I mean, that's I mean, like, luckily maybe her being wasted maybe helped the pain a little bit when it went down, but
I don't know.
I've never been stabbed by a glass unicorn before.
Yeah,
but I think that one stood out because the what are some of the other, I mean,
I think the
sorority mother, she gets getting hooked, gets slams with that hook, which that's a great sequence too, because he's just standing there, and the same thing, a POV, you see his hand holding this hook, so the audience knows it's coming, and you almost, because the POV, you're in his shoes, this is the audience killing this woman who was drunk as well. So maybe that set the rules for...
Yeah, I was going to say, there's lots of don't drink messages in this movie.
And then now she's up there. And that was a good sequence, too. I like him just, his hand shaking, he's holding that hook, like, it's coming. And then bam. And I don't think you see it, though. I don't think you see anything go in her head.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it cuts, yeah.
I mean, what other... Obviously, some other girls got killed in it, but I can't think of any. Can you?
I think those are it, actually.
Is that it?
I think this had a pretty relatively low body count. There's that one girl who's killed off screen whose body they found.
Like the little girl.
Yeah.
Which that's upsetting, too, because I think, like, the parent was there.
Yeah, the parent was there. Then.
God damn.
And that's what I think gets you about this movie is, like, a lot of these teen slasher movies, you don't really see the parents' reactions. Like we get that Halloween 2 at the beginning, the sheriff's upset.
Yeah, that is.
But in this movie, like the girl's killed in the beginning, then immediately like we see her dad show up and is like, "Where's my daughter?" And of course everyone's like, "Oh, we thought she left." We didn't. And then at the end of the movie, I think doesn't he like he ends up collapsing from shock once it's all said and done, and they have to carry him out.
But they still, you're right. But they don't. He still doesn't know though. I guess he just maybe assumes that she's dead.
Yeah,
they never found her.
Yeah, I felt like in that moment, like it hit them. Like they find because they know Margot Kidder's dead. They were like, oh, we can't find the other ones. and he just claps. I think that's when it hits him that like his daughter's most likely dead.
That actually is a good point. You don't really, on these slasher movies, you don't see the parents, and that just comes back to kind of the whole tone and mood of this movie. There's this unsettling, upsetting, uncomfortable, because that's almost a part of the movies that you don't want to see. And it kind of maybe takes away from the quote-unquote fun of horror movies, which obviously 80s horror movies start getting a little more silly and hokey.
Yeah.
But this is what separates this movie from the other ones, I think, is just that it's a bummer. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine, I always think about that with these older movies, because we're at a time now where you really question, like, what else could really be done? I mean, like truthfully, like, what else, what hasn't the audience seen, or what, is there anything that would really, I don't want to say if we're jaded now, but like what else could be done? Like, if you look at these movies in the 70s, or even like The Exorcist, or people think like, what, like, you haven't seen anything like this ever.
Yeah.
Like, that's when you hear the stories about people passing out in theaters or throwing up in theaters. Like, I don't know if that would happen anymore.
I don't know. I mean, I heard stories about the first Paranormal Activity, people running out, or people.
Really?
But I mean, personally, I liked it, but I never really felt like that scary.
Activity. Yeah, it was scary. I mean, but it wasn't. But that's the problem with those ghost movies, and why I tend to avoid those ghost films. Yes, Paranormal Activity kind of had the Blair Witch gimmick, where it's this is found footage, but I feel that maybe Paranormal Activity, because it's the found footage, and people maybe go home that night and are laying in bed and kind of like, oh shit, like thinking about it. But like those ghost movies, seems like it's almost just scary. It's scarier to watch in the moments, and there's jump scares. And if you're in a dark theater, like, oh, this is creepy. Opposed to something like Black Christmas, which kind of tackles the subjects of abortion and parents finding their kids and the father looking for his daughter. Those are kind of more, I feel like, situations that can affect the person for not just in the moment. Like, you'll get home thinking like, oh man, that is true horror. Like, that's.
Yeah, this kind of, for me, works on the same level where I think a good haunted house movie works, where like, you kind of see home as like your safe place, like, it's your house, it, like, what's going on. And in like haunted house movies, like, not even home is safe. And in this, kind of takes that to, I think, even creepier of an extreme, because we don't, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who believe in ghosts. If you do, that's your thing. But in this, I think it's scarier because it's not a ghost or supernatural entity. It's some guy living in the attic.
Yeah.
And like, these people are completely unaware of it until the end. They assume that this is their sorority house, that they're safe, and this guy's creeping down from the attic and killing them and bringing them up to the attic with him.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that, and it's more like it's under your skin more.
Yeah,
and that's kind of that's my beef towards a lot of those. Like, nothing wrong with like Conjuring and Insidious and all those movies. I mean, they're scary movies and they're fine movies, but like, it's almost. There's just something creepier when, I don't know, I always found movies scarier when it seems like it could actually happen.
Yeah, there's something more visceral about it.
Yeah, and that's what makes those movies stand out and become cult. Mm-hmm. And I understand, like, Jason's and Freddy's, like, they start getting kind of more fun, and people go to these movies to see Jason or Freddy or Michael killing these people. That's almost what those movies became, opposed to being more character pieces, which this one, I don't even know if this one's. Like, I feel like Halloween might have got the characters done more well.
Yeah.
Because you're with Jamie Lee Curtis the whole time, basically. And this one maybe jumps around. Like, they had a little bit of, like, a cop detective story. And then, like, you see the girls in the house, but you only kind of follow, like, one or two of them.
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? And but, like we were saying, it has those subjects and those kind of realistic situations and scenarios, which that's what separates it from how horror kind of became, 10 years after this movie came out. And I wonder, which is funny because you can't really prank call now. That's another thing that's kind of funny about
Yeah.
horror movies and makes them almost scarier because they didn't have the resources that we have now with cell phones and security.
Yeah, home security or computers.
Yeah,
or,
like
you know.
can't. If someone keeps calling you, like if it's something real bad or threatening, like I'm sure they could get that. They could find that source. I would imagine right away.
Yeah, or like
you
like just call them right back.
Or call them right back.
Yeah.
So that's what makes this almost even scary. That's what's even scary about those 70s movies, and not to get way off track, but that's something I respect with Rob Zombie and why he always wants to set his movies in the 70s because for that exact reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just too. Your car breaks down. You could trip away. It's just it's something scarier about that time period and people weren't used to that. Like, I'm not saying the world's more twisted now. Perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't. But the fact that in the 70s, this is coming off of the free love era. Like everyone's just kind of hippied out and like, oh, peace, and then you have something that's a dark situation like this, and it's so much more rare. And would have been more rare at the time, which would have made it more scary,
Yeah, and also we're getting into the 70s where, like, it became a very jaded, like, cynical time off the 60s because, that free love movement and all that stuff the hippie movement kind of, like, fizzled out.
Yeah.
So this movie is also kind of a perfect example of that where, the evil's still there. Like,
Yeah. And I do like, to talk about those prank calls, I think they did a really. I know it was some of it was Bob Clark's voice. I should look at the facts. I have it here. That's my phone ringing. I know it was like 2 or 3 different voices of people doing like the voices, and a lot of it was the director Bob Clark, which makes perfect sense because if you have a vision of what this sounds like, it's almost a better bet for the director to do it himself opposed to trying to explain, like, say these crazy, because there's some crazy fucked up things this person's saying, like, how the fuck Billy and Agnes, which is never explained. Like, who are these, like, what is going on?
Yeah, and that's what I love about it. You don't know, none of this is explained. You don't really know why why he picked this certain group of girls to, like, obsess over.
Yeah, comes back to the more scary aspect of why this person's doing it, and the fact that it's not explained, which is scarier because once it is explained, like you never saw the remake of Black Christmas.
I did. I was just about to ask you about that.
Do you remember it pretty well?
I didn't see it. I remember it coming out, but I heard
Black Xmas. I guess.
Doesn't it explain?
Yeah, it does. There's like flashbacks and stuff.
Isn't it like it used to be where he lived or something like that?
Yeah, it was like where he lived, and what it was. I gotta rewatch, and I don't know, like, it's been a while. I remember not minding the remake but it has been a while, but the kind of explanation for that was, and it is upsetting in its own way, is the mom, like, has sex with her son, and they have a daughter, Agnes, and the son's Billy, so Billy and Agnes is kind of like, he's like the brother / father of her, and there's like 2 of them. So like the end of Black Xmas, like there's Billy and Agnes, like they're both there, and they're all kind of like fucked up and probably like inbred, inbred, and like kind of like looks mongoloidish. So that was kind of the explanation of that, and they had flashbacks. I can't really recall how they did the flashbacks, but there were some good sequences in that. 'Cause there was a scene when the cops came in and found, I want to say maybe Billy. Don't quote me, but I think what he does is they cook them up. Yeah, maybe the sorority girls are telling like the legend of it, and that's probably how it's explained. And that she has her son locked up in the attic, and she ends up having sex with him because the father dies, or she kills the father or something. But there's a sequence, I think he kills the mom, and he cuts her up and makes he has those cookie what's it called,
The cookie cutters?
Like the cookie cutters, that like, oh, here's a Christmas tree and here's a star, and he kind of like does it with her like skin and guts and like cooks it, and like the cop's busting and he's sitting there eating it, and it's like the organs and skin like cut out as like little Christmas trees and little stars and little Santa Clauses. So then he escapes the insane asylum in the movie, like he the killer Billy, I guess, escapes, but the sister's still there or some shit, and that's kind of I don't know. It gets kind of... Anyway, it that almost makes it less scary, because there's so much explained. Yeah. And it seems like in these horror movies, once like they start explaining too much, or getting too much in-depth with the backstories, it just makes it less and less scary.
No, I agree.
I mean, how many times have they tried that? They're even talking about they've been trying to get a new Friday the 13th film going, and that's the same deal. They want to explain, like, oh, we want to see the father, and we want to explain. And it's just like, man, like, all that's gonna do is, I don't know. It never seems to work.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why, like, the original Halloween, I think, works so well, is because Michael Myers is still such a mysterious character, and Rob Zombie attempted to explain it. And so did Halloween 6.
Yeah,
I was about to say, Halloween 6 tried to explain it, and it's always better... Like, when you don't. You know, that's what's fascinating about Halloween. Like, you don't know why Myers is doing the things he's doing. You don't know why he's seemingly invincible.
Yeah.
You know, that's what makes him fascinating.
Yeah, so that's... Not to sidetrack and get back to that remake, but what I remember, though, because I had the DVD, and I don't think the movie was... I don't think this original one was a box office success either. Maybe it was, or maybe it kind of found its way. Because I did hear that... When they released it in America, they titled it Silent Night, Evil Night.
Yeah, or something like that.
And it just, people didn't... Because they avoided calling it Black Christmas because they thought that people would think it was like a black exploitation horror movie. But they ran with the title Silent Night, Deadly Night, and I think Stranger in the House was a title at some point. But that didn't work, so the director argued and had to change back to Black Christmas. And I think it did do successful. Not as successful as something like Halloween did, which was like, at the time, like, just broke every number
it was,
at that
a
time.
Successful indie movie
Successful indie movie. But I remember in the remake, in the behind-the-scenes documentary, the director of the remake, I guess the movie he did before it was Willard.
Oh,
Did you ever see that with Kristen Glover?
But I know it. Yeah, I remember that coming out.
I saw that in theaters too. And that movie bombed. And I think the remake of Black Christmas bombed. But in the, I almost feel bad. But in the documentary, the director interviewing the director, and he brought up Willard, and he said like, oh yeah, Willard was just such a bummer of an experience. Like the movie was not successful, and almost saying like, I hope this doesn't happen again with this movie, and it did.
Oh yeah.
And it was almost like, you just kind of feel bad, and I don't know. The remake is worth watching, and I know there's a lot of recognizable girls in that remake, and I think the actress in the original is the sorority mother in the remake. Not the main girl, not Olivia Hussey, but I think it was Andrea Martin, I believe, was the actress who came back. And so that was kind of a nice homage that the remake did. They had a cast member from the original. But, yeah, I mean, again, I'll have to rewatch it. But the fact, like we were saying, once things are too overly explained, too much backstory, it just takes away. And that was the whole beauty of this original, was just that unexplained ending. I really respect, and I've always liked those, because then it is not necessarily up to the audience to kind of end it for themselves, like maybe come up with that some movies do. Some films have those endings where it's kind of like, oh, this is. I mean, look at Kubrick, like any Kubrick ending, you walk away, you almost have to think, like, and almost like come up with an ending yourself, or like a reasoning behind whatever a Kubrick ending is, which is every one of his movies has an ending like that. But there is something creepy, and the fact that the phone's ringing and the credits just start rolling up and there's nothing but phone ringing. Maybe you hear carolers. I don't really remember. And that just gives it more. I don't know, man. That what's so good about this movie is it just, like we said, it sets that tone. It doesn't change. Like, you have your beats of comedy or the little comedic reliefs throughout it, which is fine. But from the beginning to the end, it just has like that creepy, eerie tone that, a lot of horror movies kind of miss.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start wrapping this up. The gore. Yeah, there wasn't much gore in this, which is good. I mean, that's another thing. Maybe sometimes what you don't see. It comes down to the argument of what you don't see may be scarier than what you do see, and I think this movie nailed that.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
But what do you think, James? What negative things would you put? I know we talked about maybe the pacing. Maybe there was something in the second act of the film where it starts dragging a little bit. Like, do you think was that the biggest issue? Do you think?
I'd probably say the pacing and maybe a little character, because like you brought up Halloween, like all the characters in Halloween I think are really well developed. Yeah. In this, like, they kind of, other than Margot Kidder's character, they all are just kind of like there. Yeah. Especially the cop characters, like we brought up John Saxon. He essentially just plays every other cop character he's ever played. Yeah. And they kind of focus on that, I think, a little bit too much in the middle, where they should be focusing on the other characters, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think the characters where this movie kind of fell flat was, maybe they could have shaved out 10 minutes or so, maybe make it a little bit shorter length, and focus more on, because you're with the girls and you're with the cops and you're with the father, and before you know it, like, who exactly are you supposed to care about or follow the story along with? So maybe that's where it fell flat. Maybe I think the remake actually was all in one night. So maybe if they would have done that and had, or maybe it started like in the morning. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe if it started in the morning and the girl got killed and the father said she never showed up, and then they... So maybe that would have improved the movie a little bit. But besides that, I mean, I would put it up there with... Halloween. Halloween maybe have had it done a little bit more right. But as far as a film goes, I mean... And especially for that time and the fact that it's dated Halloween, I think this should put it up there with it and should be shown more.
Yeah, I agree. I fucking loved it. And I think, I just added the DVD to my Amazon wishlist. I think, like, this might be a holiday tradition for me now watching this movie. I think, me too. And maybe you should check out the remake just to give it a... Maybe out of curiosity. Watch. I do have morbid curiosity that often gets the better of me.
Yeah. But besides, the negative, and we talked a little bit about the positive. I mean, we don't normally rate movies here, but if you would give it out of 10, what do you think?
I'd probably say like a 7 or 8 out of 10.
7, 8? Yeah, I think. I mean,
it stuck with me for a lot longer than most other horror movies do. Like, I was thinking about it days after it was done.
Yeah. I agree, man. I would give it a 7, 7.5. Maybe, I don't know, like maybe 7.5 out of 10. It's one that, especially fans of horror, should definitely see. It is a fun Christmas one to do, a little bit different. It's dark. It's maybe one of the more darker Christmas films out there.
Yeah, and I brought up on my podcast, which will be out. Our episode will be out by the time this is out. But we're doing like unconventional Christmas movies this month on ours, and it definitely seems to be something with our generation I've noticed where we don't seem to like traditional Christmas movies. We seem to gravitate towards these more darker, like Die Hard or Krampus. Yeah, like Krampus came out a few years ago, but it's already catching on as like this Christmas tradition to watch this movie.
I still haven't seen that. It's pretty good.
It's good, man. It's good. But we'll be doing that this month for our podcast as well. Or like Gremlins. Gremlins. But yeah, we don't seem, other than like Christmas Vacation or something like that, we don't seem to like these more like sappy holiday movies. We seem to like the darker. It's something with, like, I think the millennial generation, we seem to have this dark sensibility about us. Like, our sense of humor is very dark. And that's why I think we gravitate towards these around this time of year. And I think we should definitely start watching this movie more.
I think so. I think this would be a nice yearly tradition. And I put it up there with any Christmas movie, truthfully. And Bob Clark's follow-up, I don't know if his follow-up film, but 10 years later he did Christmas Story. Yeah, I would much rather watch this.
Oh, I would too.
I know it's completely different genre, but yeah, this... Hey. It's okay.
Freya.
Hey, she just wants in the cast. But yeah, maybe that's her wrapping us up. Come on, wrap up, guys. Wrap up.
That's my dog in the background, everyone.
Yes.
Just getting impatient.
But yeah, great film. Everyone should check it out. Yeah, 7.5, 8 out of 10 seems appropriate. I think the Rotten Tomatoes might at 67%, maybe a little bit on the lower side.
Yeah, that's low.
I think it should be appreciated. And even if you don't like the movie, I mean, you should definitely respect it and appreciate it for what it is and what it kind of started and styles and trends that it started. And it's definitely became one of my favorites. And I don't know if I would you put it in top? I know you do. James does a lot of like top. Did you do 100 top 100 horror movies? Is that what you did?
No, I did my top 25.
Top 25. Mm-hmm. Would this make the cut? Do you think?
Maybe I'd have to sleep on it a bit, but yeah, it might. Justin, my co-host of my podcast, he suggested that in 5 years, I do my top 20 again, if updated.
See, updated.
Yeah, because I'm wrapping up my top 20 superhero movies.
Nice. Which
is already this year alone. I think your films will be added into my top favorites. And Justin said I should do that again, do horror again, and before that I did my top 20 movies of all time. So he said I should.
That sounds hard, man. How do you?
I don't have the time. It's taken me a year to do my superhero movies because I just don't have the time to do it.
I don't even know. Yeah, I would definitely out of 20. I think I would have to put this one in there.
Yeah, this might be.
Just because, I mean, like I said, like, just an appreciation factor of it, that this movie kind of opened the doors for a lot of other movies. I think it should be in at least the top 20. I mean, Halloween I would put above it.
Yeah, Halloween is my top 5, I think. For
me. I would put Halloween top 5 for sure. But yeah, out of 20, this one for sure should make the cut, I would think. Mm-hmm. And, but yeah, that's all I got. What is James? What is your tell the audience your podcast and how they can find it?
My podcast is Cinema d'Amore, d'Amore, Italian. You can find us on iTunes or Google Play or Podbean. Subscribe us, leave reviews. Our whole thing is every month we have a different theme. Sometimes we tell you the theme, other times we want you guys to figure it out. And there are 3 of us, sometimes 4. Our fourth co-host is kind of, we call him like the man in the shadows. He's not always there, but sometimes he is, and each of us picks a different movie to discuss, and each week we discuss it. And it's fun because, like, you know, we did Westerns, and Justin picked McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which I had never seen before. So it was cool because, like, even for me, sometimes I'm exposed to new movies that I didn't think of, or, you know, and this month, like, with my pick, each of us rotate picking themes, and I picked Unconventional Christmas. So we started with Batman Returns, which I fucking love.
Oh yeah.
And then we're doing yeah, I mean, I won't spoil it, but you guys will see.
Check that out, guys. Like and subscribe to them. Sometimes I'm in some of the episodes when I'm lucky.
Yeah,
they bring me on board.
We had Brad on our old show, and he kicked off our new show of our first episode, which is Halloween.
Yeah, go check out that one. Guys.
We might have him on in a month or so here.
Please do. So guys, thanks for whacking with us today. This was a great way to start off a new horror podcast. Not a new horror podcast, but a episode that is appreciating a horror movie opposed to bashing it like our Bram Stoker's Dracula one. And James will definitely be back to do some more horror ones. We got some lined up in the books, and so guys, thanks for enjoying this. If you did enjoy it, I don't know. Thanks for listening to it. If you made it this far, and like and subscribe, and Merry Christmas, guys. Keep on whacking it.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
Billy. This fucking guy.